Welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm your host, Corey Graham. Join us here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where the independent new authors come first. The new book written by Zelda Bendinger. It's titled Self-Forgiveness, Self-Love, and Self-Care, Divine Power Within Yourself. And this will guide readers towards personal empowerment. And we're going to be talking all about it right now. Zelda is sitting right here with me. Zelda, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you being here with me tonight.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Zelda, can you tell me all about self-forgiveness, self-love, and self-care? What are readers in store for here?
It's a healing process from within in order to find happiness, joy, and peace in this world.
What kinds of readers did you have in mind when you were writing it?
We're the people who are looking for happiness. We all are looking for some type of happiness. And so we find certain things, maybe a new house or a new car. And then when they get old, we're looking for happiness again. And we have to see that it comes from within ourselves.
How did this come about, Zelda? What gave you the idea to write it?
Well, actually, my daughter, she mentioned to me several years ago, Mom, you should write a self-help book. You're always helping everybody. And I have been a helper all of my life. And then I started hearing from the angels, and they pushed me even further to go ahead and write this book.
I was going to ask about the angel wings on the cover, but now that makes sense to me.
Yes.
Very beautiful.
It was inspired by the angels.
I love it.
Yes.
Zelda, what does your writing background look like? Are you experienced in this, or is this all kind of new to you?
I have written a book prior to this book. I published it in 2013, and it was a book of memoirs, Honesty from Within. So this is not my first rodeo. However, the guidance I got towards doing this one was a little different than the first book.
Did this one take you a long time to write and publish and everything?
Actually, it didn't. I started writing in May of 2023, and by November of 2023, it was in the process of being published.
So you wrote the manuscript, and then you start that publishing process once you hooked up with Christian Faith Publishing, and there's a lot involved in that end of things. So, Zelda, what did you find the most challenging part about that publishing process?
The patience of waiting and the back and forth with the editing. It was very tedious, but you want to make sure all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed.
Absolutely. And there's nothing like seeing the fruits of your labor, that finished product, and there it was. It finally came in, your first copy. You're holding it in your hands, Zelda. What was that moment like for you?
Oh, my. I was so overjoyed. I was so excited that the work I had put into the book came back to me feeling I had accomplished one more heavenly task given to me.
I really admire your heart for helping so many people. So now that you have your work out there, you're published, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of all that for you?
Knowing that this will impact somebody. It will help them to see themselves as the individual, unique person that they are.
So looking down the road, have you considered writing more? Do you have some more ideas you might want to put out there?
I do. I'm actually have been asked, a lot of people have asked for me a continuation of the first book. So I'm implementing an agenda now for the second memoir book. And I've also been getting other information from the angels that they would like into another book form as well, speaking more about the other side.
So when you sit down to start on something like this, do you work out sort of an outline first, or do you start writing and kind of see where things go?
Actually, I pray first. Then I begin to write down information that I'm hearing or feeling within inside to write down. And then as I have all these notes everywhere, I finally put it all together into an outline. And then I begin the writing process.
Is writer's block, anything like that, ever something you have to deal with?
No, actually, I find peace when I know that I'm given a break. I see it as a break. They're giving me a break to rest.
I love that perspective. That's great.
Thank you. Yes. You know, we don't take the time to rest. We're always on the go. So finding rest is important as well.
Well, it sounds like so many people are going to find help and encouragement in the pages of this book. Again, the title is Self-Forgiveness, Self-Love, and Self-Care, Divine Power Within Yourself. It's written by Zelda Bendinger and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so get it everywhere, really. Places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Zelda, it's been great talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show.
Thank you, Corey. It's a pleasure to have met you.
Hether Flanigan's new book, it's titled Stroke of Love, How Recovering from a Massive Stroke Has Taught Me That Vulnerability is Our Superpower. We're going to find out all about this. Hether, the author, is right here with me now. Hether, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hether, can you tell me all about Stroke of Love? What are readers going to find when they open this up?
Well, it was very therapeutic for me to write as I'm still recovering from a massive stroke. And my therapist, specifically my speech and my occupational therapist, both really encouraged me to write a book in 2022. And I really didn't want to. And I thought, oh, how cliche. I almost died. And then I would go write a book. Like, what am I going to write about? Who cares about Hether Flanigan from Texas? Like, why would I write a book? And they said, no, you have to, because you're so inspiring and you have so much to share. They're like, just share your story. Just share your story. And so finally, I reluctantly sat down at my computer in January of 2023 and started writing it. And even then I was hesitant, but then I just started writing. And my husband's like, just write about your life because you're very inspiring and you're very motivating and you have had lots of really cool opportunities. And so it's good for you to share your journey. And so I just wrote about my story, really, about my journey up until I had a massive stroke and the brief early days of that, because I was only 1 year and 10 months post-stroke when it happened. So I wrote about just my early part of the journey. And so that's what really readers will find in reading it. It's just about how we have to keep, no matter what happens to us in life, we keep moving forward. And I mean, I was an extremely healthy 47-year-old, never had any health issue at all, never even had high blood pressure, nothing. And all of a sudden I had this massive stroke that was so massive they had to remove part of my skull for 2.5 months. So out of nowhere that happened, and I have had to relearn everything again. I mean, literally everything. So I hope that when readers read my story, they can hear and see in that how you, no matter what happens to you in life, whether it's a massive stroke or any health issue or a job loss or a divorce or any struggle that you go through in life, we all have struggles that we go through. And even if the struggle might seem small to someone else, or like in my case, it's a miracle that I lived. But a big part of my book is what I wrote about. I had gone through many, many struggles in my life prior to a massive stroke, like we all have. And the bottom line is you just keep going and you keep moving forward, and that's all we really can do. Even if it is something massive that almost takes your life, the whole point is just you have to keep going forward. And why I titled the book the way I did is because what I've really learned is how much love and kindness is really all around us.
So what does your writing background look like? Is this your first go at this kind of thing, Hether?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've never written. I've never written anything before. It's my first time to write a book. First time to really write anything since I was in school.
Oh, wow. So did this whole process take you a long time to do, the writing and publishing and everything?
Well, yes and no. I mean, there were parts of it I feel like that took a long time. I actually wrote it, I would say, or I think most people say that I wrote it probably pretty quickly. But keep in mind, when you have a stroke, you lose everything. I mean, I had no job. I lost my job. I couldn't even walk or stand up. So once I got home from being in 2 different inpatient facilities after being in the hospital for a month, once I got home, I really didn't have a lot to do during the day except for the therapies, which the therapists would come to my home. So I was doing physical, occupational, and speech. But then once I decided to write the book, I was discharged from therapy. So then I was just home. And so my only activity every day was writing the book, which is why I wrote it in 3 months. So most people would say that that's pretty fast to write a book, but if it's really the only thing you're doing every day besides your home exercises for your therapy,
right,
I would get up and focus on writing the book every day. And I finished the manuscript in about 3 months, and then I had to figure out how I was going to get it published. because I didn't know anything. So I kind of just searched around on the internet and I found Christian Faith Publishing, and they were so kind and gracious to me. And then from there, we got started on the process of editing and cover design and all of those things.
Again, the title is Stroke of Love: How Recovering from a Massive Stroke Has Taught Me That Vulnerability is Our Superpower. This is written by Hether Flanigan and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so you can get it places like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Well, Hether, thanks again for joining me and telling me all about your story. I had a really nice time talking.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
This is a tale of redemption and resilience. It's the new book by J.L. Sterling. It's titled Try Not to Forget. And that's what we're going to be talking about. JL is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. JL, welcome. Thank you for joining me tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm interested to learn all about Try Not to Forget, JL, and what readers are going to find here. Can you tell me about it?
Yeah, this book was born out of my mother having Alzheimer's. She and my dad got married when she was 15 years old, so he took care of her whole life. And when he died in 2004, some friends of ours at the funeral said that they suspected Mom might have Alzheimer's. So we studied up on it, found out what it was, had no idea really what it was. And after finding out some about it, spent the next 7 years dealing with it. And there's so much came out of that 7 years that I decided to write a book so that maybe someone else might know what's going to go on if they have somebody with Alzheimer's in their family or their life.
So have you ever done anything like this before when it comes to writing books and publishing and all that?
I never had one published. I've written about 4 or 5 books just for the fun of it, but I never did have them published or even thought about it.
So when you got started writing this one, did it take you a long time to write it?
I think it took about a year to write it. The info was there. Everything that's in the book happened so fervently and rapidly. It took quite a while for me to really make myself write the whole thing down and seek publishing.
Would you say this was a tough thing for you to write, or was it an easier sort of thing?
No, it was an easy sort of thing to write. Some of it was a little tough, thinking back on my mom and all she went through, and everyone else that has Alzheimer's. But no, it was an easy thing to write. It kind of flowed, by itself.
So there's that writing part, but then you get finished with that manuscript and you hand it off to your publisher. So give it to Christian Faith, you start that publishing process. JL, what did you find the most challenging part about that publishing end of things?
Well, it was a lot harder than I thought it would be. There was so much for me to do that they kept asking me to do that it probably was no big deal. But since I had no idea what I was doing, it took a lot longer. It was a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, but it really wasn't hard at all. It's just because I didn't know what I was doing.
Then after all that work that you put into it, that day came and you're finally holding it in your hands, that first copy of Try Not to Forget. JL, tell me about that moment. What was that like for you?
Well, they sent me some copies. I had all the reading that I had to do for the corrections and all that 1,000 times over. But when I finally got the book, they sent me 10 books of this book. I have one in my hand right now. It was very satisfying to see something in print that I did myself. More so, it was satisfying to see that maybe somebody might read this book and figure out how to deal with someone that has Alzheimer's in such a way that they might not have.
And now it's official. You're a published author. You have your work out there. JL, what would you say is the most rewarding aspect of all that for you?
Well, if I can get some readers, that are satisfied with the book and learn something from the book and maybe get some comfort from the book, actually, that will be the satisfying part. I don't really care too much about selling the book or having a whole lot of people read the book. I don't really care about that. That would be nice, but my goal was, and still is, to enlighten all the friends of mine and people that I don't know, of course, that have heard the word Alzheimer's and dementia, but they don't have any idea what it's all about.
Well, I'm sure right now you're focusing on getting the word about this book out there and that whole marketing end of things. Have you given thought to maybe writing another and publishing more here in the future?
Well, I have some books that I've written that are ready to publish. I mean, I finished them quite some time ago. I do have 2 that I'm writing right now, and I might see if I can't get them published also. They're not like this book where they're born out of tragedy, if you want to call it that. They're just mystery novels And I've written some Western novels, 10 of them, as a matter of fact, little dime store novels. Maybe we'll see about getting some of them published, yes.
Well, what a fantastic book. I know there are going to be so many readers who are comforted by these words. Again, the book is titled Try Not to Forget. It's written by J.L. Sterling and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or traditional brick-and-mortar stores, too.
Yes.
J.L., thank you so much for coming on the show and telling me about this book and a little bit about your mother's story. I really appreciate it.
Well, yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Sitting down with me right now here at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, I'm talking with author James Williams. James, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I wanted to congratulate you on your new book. It's titled Our Last Day and the Return of Christ. James, can you tell me about this book and what readers are going to find here?
Yeah, the book is biblical eschatology in nature, and it's about the last days. As Christians, they speak regularly about the last days. People wonder when the last days are. So I named it particularly The Last Day because out of the last days, we are in the last one. And there's actually two. And in the book, I explain what I mean by that. It'll come very easily and very clear to most people, but that's what it's about. It's about end times. The book is about end times and the return of Christ and how we are to know when it is.
James, was it generally a church-going Christian audience that you had in mind for this?
Actually, I consider this a very important message for everyone. Of course, Christians are going to be more closer to understanding what I'm talking about than the average Joe would be or Jane. But it's for everyone, even for young kids who would be of a certain age and understanding of Scripture.
So what was that spark, James? What gave you that push to say, okay, I'm going to sit down and get started on this one?
I've realized for a long time that there's a set time for everything. And even when you read Scripture, you read about Abraham. Abraham was told way ahead of time that his people would go into slavery for 400 years. God told him. Noah knew that he had 120 years. So for people to not understand that God sets time and extensions of time in a particular way. And so we've gotten confused over the last 2,000 years about when his return should be because certain things in the Scriptures say we're not supposed to know it, but that's not the case. And that's what my book explains, a lot of misconceptions on understanding time and when things are supposed to happen, appointed times and those kind of things. So over the time, I realized that I needed a key. I knew what my answers were going to be, but I needed something to be able to clarify it and explain it in a certain way. So knowing that there was a timeline set, I didn't have a way of explaining it, but it's Sister Billy Grimm. She's of the Glorious Church. And what she did is that she read a manuscript that most Christians either don't know about or don't read at all called the Talmud. So she became an expert in all things Hebrew over the years and so took this out of the Talmud. And the Talmud sets down that timeline that I've been talking about and explains it, that Adam was given 6,000 years, which comes out to 6 days in heavenly terms. The way she explained it so very clearly and set it out, that was the key I needed. And I immediately knew that there was time now to put things to pen and paper.
So once you got started, was this a long journey for you, James, the writing and publishing process and everything?
No, not a long journey per se, because it's basically a lot of it has to do with my life and my walk with God and the things that have happened to me. So the beginning of the book pretty much tells my story and the things that were communicated to me spiritually. And so since all of that information was already in my head, once I found the key from Sister Grimm, and it actually even took me about 3 months to put everything into a book.
So you finished that manuscript, you handed that off to Christian Faith Publishing and started that publishing process. James, what did you find the most challenging about that publishing end?
Actually, things went pretty well, but I didn't realize how much time it takes to go over things, send things back and forth, make sure everything is in place and ready to, the way it should be. So that's really what took the most time. It wasn't me putting things into a manuscript. It was double checking and adding things to it through the process
think so many readers are going to find a blessing in these pages. Again, the title is Our Last Day and the Return of Christ. This is written by James Williams, and it's published by Christian Faith Publishing. So find it everywhere, places like Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes, also right down the street at your local bookshop. James, thanks again for coming on the show. It was really nice talking with you tonight.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much.
I'm welcoming back right now to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable one of my favorite guests, and that would be author Jill Fandrich. Jill, welcome back. It's great to be talking with you again.
Thank you, Corey. It's so nice to be here.
Congratulations on another book out. It's titled Success is Elemental, Basic Elements for Your Climb to Success. Jill, can you tell me all about this?
Thank you. Yes, Corey, this book, it's so unique in the sense that it combines leadership strategies with strong character qualities. And I think this is essential for achieving profound success, not just success, but profound success. And that can be in any organization or team or classroom or even in a family environment. I think Success is Elemental is compelling because it merges the leadership strategies with the character qualities. And not only with the skills and techniques, but it's deeply rooted in character and principles. And I really think that's a way to make everyone thrive.
So what sort of readers were you going for here? Were you going for more of people in the leadership positions?
You know, that's a wonderful question. And this particular book of mine, I think can go from like age 12 or 13 when you're just starting on childhood leadership skills all the way to plus 100. Because the qualities in it and the strategies are timeless. They're character qualities that enhance leadership strategies. You can have a strategy and somebody knowing all the right skills to be a leader, but if they don't have integrity, if they don't have resilience, if they don't have an ability to relate to people, there is no way that they can continue on and be fully successful. I think the fully successful segment here deals with the embedded character qualities. I think true leadership, it's not defined by the strategies that you employ, but by the character that you embody. And this book is unique in that it can be in a school system for, teens on up, or it can be in an actual work environment, part of the orientation system. So I think that's what makes this book very unique and for everybody.
So what inspired this, Jill? What sparked you to write it?
Well, I really wanted an environment where I could help everyone. And I think this is a book that touches so many different people. It's not just one age group, but it's a way that people can thrive. And it's not just for like a work-based leadership thing. It's in a family environment. It's in a friendship environment. It's in a school system. This type of book can touch every single person. And that just fascinated me that I could write something that has the ability to reach so many different people.
So is this an easy book for you to write, Jill, or did you find some challenges along the way?
I found this one very easy. I just wanted to make sure I could find as many qualities as I can. So I came up with 50 character qualities, and that's a lot of qualities. So it's a book where you don't want to just breeze right through it. It's a simple read, but it's one where you maybe want to read a character quality a week and then practice it a little bit. So there's a lot of application in it. There's a lot of reflection. And I ask you to look at this quality, each one, and find it in other people and exemplify that quality. So I have you practice it over and over. And along with these 50 qualities are actual leadership strategies as well. So I have about 9 or 10 chapters, I think 9 chapters of leadership strategies and how to turn a failure into success and how to focus on things and not be maybe, so scatterbrained and all over the place, how to narrow in your focus and do a good job at what it is that you are to do to keep your attention in one spot. So it's a very nice combination and a transition from the leadership strategies into the character qualities. And, like I said, I present it in such a way that you'll be able to practice the skills and they will get embedded in you. The more you practice, the more you look for them in other people, the more you're going to find them in other people. And sometimes you're going to notice when people don't have them. So it's going to become more and more obvious. So I think it really helps you develop along the way.
What a wonderful book. This is so needed out there. Again, it's titled Success is Elemental, Basic Elements for Your Climb to Success. It's written by Jill Fandrich, and published by Covenant Books, so get it everywhere: Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and iTunes, and traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Jill, once again, it's been really fantastic talk, and thanks again for coming on with me.
Thank you, Corey. It's an honor to be here. I appreciate it.
The new book, written by Bette Mulley, titled Scampy Meets Santa, is a tale of kindness and friendship. And we're going to talk all about it right now. Bette is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Bette, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you being here with me tonight.
So am I.
Bette, can you tell me all about Scampy Meets Santa and the story you're telling here?
It's about a white squirrel, and white squirrels are a very rare breed of squirrels that live in the hometown where I grew up, Brevard, North Carolina. And I met the squirrels in my brother's backyard. And it's about Scampy. This is his first Christmas. And he wakes up and he's so happy that it's snowing because the raccoon mask won't bully him. And so the story is about when the raccoon, gets caught in a cage that was meant for Scampy. At first, Scampy says, "Better you than me." And he goes home and forgets about it and doesn't tell his mother. But the next morning, he thinks no one belongs in a cage. So he chooses to do an act of kindness to this bully. And they become friends. And Mama had told him that if someone does a good deed, Santa may come and visit their Christmas Eve party. So this is what happened. This book has been a long time coming, but it's so important in history today that kindness over revenge is what we really need. I think that's one reason the book has been so successful, where I've been selling it in St. Angelo at all kinds of events, choosing kindness over revenge.
That's a great message, Bette. What sorts of readers did you have in mind for this?
Children from maybe 7 to 10. How I tell it with kids is I will just tell the story and turn the pages and they can see what's happening. That's why I wanted a picture book.
Have you done this kind of thing before, Bette, or are you new to all this?
Very new. I've been a storyteller for probably over 50 years. I'm 90 years old and dyslexic. It all started when I was in my 60s and I started getting the AARP magazine, and there was an article that said, do something different every year. So I started off doing storytelling. And then one time I was asked to tell at an event where there were illustrators and editors from New York and around at a conference for writers and illustrators. And one of the people drew me aside, and she happened to be a new editor with Golden Books. And she said, "Have you ever thought about writing your stories?" So I joined a writer's critique group, and Scampy began there. I've never taken a writing course. I've never taken a course in creative writing. But because I'm a storyteller, it just started evolving over decades. And finally, this is what I think is interesting. One morning I was coming out of sleep, and Scampy appeared and said, "When are you going to get off this bed and get me published?" And so for the next 4 days or more, I started calling self-publishers and interviewing them. And then I selected Christian Faith Publishing, and they accepted it.
What was the most difficult thing for you about the publishing process?
Seeing the corrections, being able to find the correct words. Pronunciation of words is one of my learning issues. So having to really push myself to describe how the squirrels and other animals were supposed to look, it just was really hard, but I did it.
Well, I really believe the children and families will really be into this book. Again, the title is Scampy Meets Santa. It's written by Bette Mulley, published by Christian Faith Publishing, and it's available everywhere, really, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes and right down the street at your local bookshop. Bette, it's been really wonderful talking with you tonight. Thank you so much again for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
This is a memoir that describes the author's journey from childhood abuse to freedom. It's written by Francine McClain, and it's titled On the Other Side of Pain is Your Victory. We're going to talk all about this book. Francine is here with me now. Francine, welcome to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. It's really great to be talking with you.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Francine, can you tell me all about On the Other Side of Pain is Your Victory? What readers are going to find here?
Well, actually, it's just my personal journey of overcoming trauma and abuse in my childhood. That's what I went through. But like I said, I went through it. So it's basically a journey of me overcoming the trauma and abuse and finding hope and being healed.
And would you say you wrote this primarily for those that have experienced that same thing, victims of some sort of abuse in their childhood?
Yeah. It's for people who have gone through pain because, in actuality, we've all had our moments with pain, some kind of trauma. If we look in the world today, you see so many people that are not free because of something they have gone through, but they've never processed or they've never gotten a victory over. So my heart is that this will touch the hearts of many, many people. And I show them that they don't have to wear that badge of pain or shame, but that through Christ, they can come out of it and God can actually make it a victory story.
I love it. Now, I can imagine, you brought up some painful memories when you're writing about this, and I couldn't imagine it could have been a particularly easy thing for you to write. So was that the case? Was this challenging for you?
Yeah. Actually, it was years in the making. I mean, years. I never thought that I would be telling the world my story. Once I came through it, I thought that was it. The fact that I made it out alive, that was victory for me. I never knew about God. I didn't know that he could turn that story into victory. I didn't know any of those things. I didn't plan on telling anybody anything. But once God restored me, he began to tell me and that there are other people just like you that need to know that there is hope, that there is victory.
So what does your writing background look like, Francine? Have you done this kind of thing before, or are you sort of new to all this?
I am absolutely new. I don't have any background in it at all. Never wanted to be a writer. Never thought I could be a writer. All of this is brand new to me.
So once you finished your manuscript, you handed that off to Covenant Books, you started that publishing process. Francine, what did you find the most challenging part of that publishing end?
I think the amount of time that it took, because if you're not an author, if you've never done it before, I didn't know that it was going to be such a long process, the editing part, just waiting, the waiting game. I just thought, you turn in the manuscript and next thing you know, hey, here's your book. But that's not how it is. You have to go through the editing part. And I think the editing part is the longest part of the process.
So you got through that, and eventually there it was. Your first copy finally came in, and you're holding this in your hands for the first time, Francine. What was that like?
It was a surreal moment. Like I said, I never thought that I would write a book. I never thought that I would be through that trauma or pain, or that I would want to share what happened to me. Because even as a child, when people read my book that know me, they say, you never talked about it. We never knew, So it's the fact that I'm free to be able to share. It's surreal.
Well, this is your first book. You're officially a published author now, Francine. And when you think about that, what's the most rewarding aspect of that all for you?
That I actually did it. That I actually followed through, because I would write and I would put it down, and then I would go through, you don't need to write a book. There's so many people who have self-help books. There's so many people out there that have these books, but it was like, but they're not me. Everybody is an individual and everybody's experience is different. And there's only one Francine, so I had to tell my story.
Oh, what a wonderful story of freedom, and I think so many people are going to love this. Again, it's titled, On the Other Side of Pain is Your Victory. This is written by Francine McClain, published by Covenant Books, and available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, iTunes, traditional brick-and-mortar stores, really wherever you usually go to get your books. Francine, thank you again for joining me and telling me all about your story and all about this book. It was really great talking with you tonight.
It was really great being with you.
This is the true story of a man's search for his missing Vietnamese fiancée during the Vietnam War. It's titled The Great Goodbye. It's written by Stephen J. Spencer, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Stephen is right here with me now. Stephen, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining me here tonight.
It's nice to be here.
Steve, can you tell me all about The Great Goodbye and the story that you've written here?
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but I really didn't talk about this story for more than 50 years. It's something that happened to me in the Vietnam War. I fell in love with this Vietnamese girl when I was in Vietnam. We got engaged to be married, but we encountered a lot of opposition for it. Her parents didn't want us to get married. My parents didn't want us to get married. And the Army wasn't going to give me permission to get married in country either. There was a lot of upheaval in the country. They were taking troops out. Then they decided to reassign me back to the United States stateside. As a result of that, I lost my opportunity and my window to really, stay in country to be with her and get married. So before I left, I told her and I promised her that I would come back to get her, and succeed in marrying her. What happened was when I got back to the States, I lost contact with it. I used everything. I tried using embassies, consulates. I even contacted a U.S. senator. In fact, that U.S. senator was Senator Kennedy's office in Massachusetts. And I had a chaplain in Vietnam that I knew, and he physically went to the village that she was in, and he found out that there had been a Viet Cong attack in that village, and people just kind of spread out. And plus the loss of American jobs there didn't help. So she was gone, she was missing, and my letters weren't even coming back for a while, and then slowly they came back, but there was no answer. There was nothing. It went on like this for a year. I'd keep writing letters, nothing happened. So I made the decision, and I told my parents that I was going to go back and do a search for her in country. And that's what I did. I just decided to go back to the war and search for her. That's what I did.
So after all this time, what made you decide to sit down and write the story and tell the world?
Well, for the longest time, it had a big impact on my life. I eventually ended up finding her, but I'll get to that in a moment. But after losing her in the war, I had become pretty depressed about the war, didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to really discuss it. I had problems with relationships after that, and it took me roughly another 18 years before I even decided to find somebody else and get married. But when I told my wife about this, she said, gee, you got to write this up and give it to somebody. And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And for the first 22 years of our marriage, I wouldn't do it until she finally talked me into telling somebody. So I ended up talking to a podcast producer, somebody like yourself. And he said, hey, this is going to make a great podcast. So he did. He was pretty good about getting all the details out of me. He asked if there was any proof of that. Everything I had from what happened in Vietnam, I had it in a box in my garage. It had been sitting there 50 years. I had pictures, I had photographs, I had copies of plane tickets, I had notes, I had letters. So I decided to scan them in my copier and send them to them. And he gave me a call back and goes, holy, this and that. And then he says, we have got to do something about this. He says, have you written it up in a book yet? And I said, no. And he says, well, you ought to try to do that. And I talked it over with my wife. And so I decided to do that after the podcast was made. So I wrote the book, and it was published by Newman Springs. The story just kind of went out to the world.
Yeah, this is such a personal story to you, and you've spent so much time and hard work on it. And that day came, you finally got to hold the finished product. You're holding The Great Goodbye in your hands for the first time, Steve. What kind of a moment was that like for you?
First time I did that? Well, it was kind of closure for me. I don't know about other people that write books, but for me, when I looked at that book and I said, this is the closure I had to a chapter in my life that was more than 50 years old. And because that's what my wife was talking me into it. For me, it was closure. As far as being an author, I had written a book before, but it had nothing to do with anything personal that I did. It was more of an academic kind of thing. So I had looked at this book and I said, this is the first real novel-like book, which was based on a true story that I had ever written. And I'd never really anticipated writing something like this. It was kind of profound for me.
Now, when you think about the writing of the book, the publishing, the whole thing, Steve, what was the most challenging part of this for you?
Well, I guess the most challenging thing about it was trying to remember all the details that happened to me, and I had to write them down. I had to persist in it. The biggest challenge was keeping at it because there were so many details that had to go into this.
Again, the title of the book is The Great Goodbye. It's written by Stephen J. Spencer and published by Newman Springs Publishing. So find it really everywhere, like Amazon and Barnes & Noble and iTunes, and also right down the street at your local bookshop. Steve, it's been fantastic talking with you today, learning about this story and about your work. Thanks again for joining me.
You're welcome. Thanks again. You have a great day then.
This is a tale of nature, community, and friendship. It's the new book written by Constance Glidden Josef. It's titled Feathered Friends. We're going to talk all about this. Constance is right here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Constance, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining me tonight.
Oh, thank you so very much. I appreciate being here.
Can you tell me all about Feathered Friends, Constance, and what readers are going to find here?
Well, as the book proclaims, it's Feathered Friends, and it's a variety of birds, whether they be Canada geese, mallard ducks, ibis, heron, you name it. They all came every night for 8 years, and many of them lived here. We had a lot of construction going on around our community with new things being built, which destroyed a lot of the woods, and so they didn't have any place to go. So when I saw them just sort of meandering around, I thought, why not give them some treats in the evening, some cracked corn, scatter it about in terms of the pond, and let's see what happens. And it was hilarious. They enjoyed it. They got to know each other, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but still, it was wonderful. And if I was late coming out with the treats in the evening, they let me know with their honks and their hoots. It was wonderful. Just a lot of fun.
Would you say this is a book you wrote primarily for bird enthusiasts?
Well, yes, and I hope that those that enjoy wildlife and the out of doors will also enjoy it, because I do want to make sure people realize that many of our feathered friends are losing a place to go home because a lot of construction that goes on, the woodland areas are removed, they don't really put much back, and they don't have a place to go. And so they wander about looking around, and it doesn't take much. We have an awful lot. We're lucky here at our condominium area where we have lots of nice green grass and aquatic plants so they can really get nourished. And the treats that I give are just that. They know it. They're not going to stay alive off of it, but they have such fun. And I want people to realize that you too can have some feathered friends that will be friends forever.
So, Constance, what does your writing background look like? Are you new to all this, or do you have some experience in it?
Well, this is not my first book being published. My first one, also a true story. It's called, now don't start laughing, Why Don't We Drive from Portland, Oregon to Argentina? It is a true story. It is a true story, and lots of photographs along the way. It was only just over 12,000 miles, so, lots to do, lots to see, lots of experiences. I didn't go by myself. I talked to a friend of mine who was a pilot for many years, and all he did was talk about South America and flying over the mountains and all these various countries. And I said, okay, now, why don't we drive? I love to drive. Why don't we just drive? And he went, really? I said, yeah. So we took spent a year covering all the maps and laying out what our itinerary would be from country to country, state to state within a country, and off we went. And now this was done in 1995, so no cell phones, not much from an internet. And it's probably the safest way of doing it because we ran into some very interesting times and we were able to get out of it. We didn't get thrown in jail or anything of that nature, but lots of fun. So that was my first book. This one came along for a variety of different reasons.
So once you sat down and got started on Feathered Friends, Constance, clear up through when it was published and was out there in stores, was this a long process for you?
Not really. Writing the book, it came about because I received a citation from the board of directors of the condominium community stating that I needed to stop feeding the birds. And I came back and I said, I'm not feeding them. I'm giving them treats. And they gave me a citation again. You have to stop. I was so disturbed by it. I cried for several days in the evening. And so I thought, no, I have lots of photographs. I have lots of memories. I don't want to forget this and I want to share it. So I sat down, and probably over an 8 to 10 month period, I put all the stories together. I used a lot of my photographs. There are over 100 photographs in the book. And so a lot of them, because they're dated, I could recreate all the instances of what was occurring and just put the story together. And that's what I did.
Oh, what a wonderful book. Again, the title is Feathered Friends. It's written by Constance Glidden Josef and published by Christian Faith Publishing, so it's available anywhere, really, like Amazon, Barnes & Noble, iTunes, also traditional brick-and-mortar stores. Constance, it's been wonderful talking with you tonight. Thanks again for coming on the show with me.
Oh, thank you so very, very much. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
This is a book about overcoming adversity. It's titled Blue Tune. It's written by Bella Sau. And we're going to be talking all about it. Bella's daughter, Ava, is here with me now at the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. Ava, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me tonight.
Hi, Corey. Thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. Ava, can you tell me all about Blue Tune and what readers are going to find when they get into it?
Yeah, so Blue Tune is a story about a whale, actually, born with a unique condition. And it's that his frequency is so high that when he tries to communicate, it doesn't just echo, it practically destroys everything around him. And so imagine that, something as simple and essential as speaking becomes a weapon of destruction. And so at its core, the book is about his journey to embrace what others might see as a disability and ultimately turning it into a gift. And so through challenges and growth, this whale essentially learns to use his unique voice to become a hero, really.
What sorts of readers do you think would be really into this?
I think the book was initially written with young adults in mind, but I truly believe that the story actually speaks to a much broader audience. I mean, the themes of overcoming challenges, embracing who you are, and really just discovering purpose are universal. No matter your age, there's something powerful about seeing a character turn adversity into opportunity. And so I also think with that Blue Tune, if you read it, you would see that it's a story with cinematic potential. I think the imagery and the emotion in the book lend themselves so well to film, which means that it could one day connect with an even larger audience. And so I really hope that readers see the story not just as a tale about a whale, but as something deeply human, a metaphor for our struggles, our dreams, and really our triumphs. So it speaks to everyone, I would say.
Oh, this is so interesting. Ava, how did the idea for this come about?
Have you heard of The Loneliest Whale?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the 52 Hertz whale, I think that story really, it planted the seed. There's a documentary about it that was really the inspiration behind the book. And with that also, if you've ever read about sort of how whales go about their life trajectory, there's a lot of suicide with the whale population. And so just morphing those ideas and merging it to become something really beautiful, those are all the inspirations behind the book.
So when your mother was writing this, has she written a lot before? Does she have experience in this kind of thing, or was she fairly new to it?
So this is the first published novel in English for her, which makes it even more meaningful. It feels like the beginning of something, significant, a milestone for her for sure. But she's been a published author and a well-known figure within the Persian language. And she's had many books written in poetry mainly and just general linguistics, but this is her first work in English and really her first step into the world of English literature and fiction. So it really is exciting.
Well, being this is not her first language, did this take a long time for her to do?
I was talking to her about it because I've heard about the story, but I didn't know exactly how long it took for her to finish it. Just like from when she first had the idea to when it was fully a final draft. She said it took about a year. I think what made it take a bit maybe longer and also a bit more complicated is that she first had to write it in Farsi. And so just to really be able to fully encapsulate all of her ideas and the expression that she wanted to convey through the book. And then from there, it was translated to English. And so a bit complicated than I think most authors in terms of drafting their ideas and writing it. From start to finish, I believe it took a year.
And there's that publishing process, and there's so much involved with that. Do you know, was that a smooth process, or were there challenges along the way?
I think smooth for sure, for the most part. She worked with the Christian Faith publishing company to publish this novel, and they really did an amazing job with taking it under their wings and doing the best they can with the graphics and the style and everything. So I would say smooth for sure from what I've seen and what she tells me. Definitely exciting.
Well, it sounds like this book is going to touch a lot of readers. It's called Blue Tune. It's written by Bella Tsao and published by Christian Faith Publishing. So get it at Amazon or Barnes & Noble or iTunes or traditional brick-and-mortar stores, really anywhere. Ava, it was really great talking with you tonight. Thank you so much for coming on the show and telling me all about Blue Tune.
You as well. Thank you so much for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. We hope to see you back here every Friday night at 8 p.m. or listen anytime via podcast at Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, to name just a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.